The Silver Chair, just doing a little bit of a recap of what we read last term. It starts off behind the gym. Jill Pole is crying because she's being chased and beaten up by bullies at Experiment House. Eustace comes around the corner. They talk a little bit about the bullies, then they talk about how he's changed because he went to Narnia over the holidays, and everyone remembers that from Voyage of the Dawn Treader. They talk about how they're going to get out of that situation with the bullies, and Eustace says, why don't we call Aslan? So they do this weird sort of thing with their arms out in front, and they call Aslan, Aslan, Aslan. Nothing seems to happen, but they do hear some bullies coming after them. So they scramble up a hill and through some bushes, and they go to a wall where there's a door. They go through the door and enter a different world with weird birds, and they're in some kind of forest. They walk through the forest, which is quite different from the England they've been in, and they get out of the forest and there's only sky, and then they see that they're at the edge of a cliff. Jill looks down and realizes that it's the biggest cliff she has ever seen. Imagine a cliff you've seen in real life and then times that by 100. That's how tall it is. She's feeling a little bit proud of herself, so she goes right to the edge and looks over. Eustace tries to pull her back. There's a bit of a struggle, and then Eustace flies off the edge of the cliff. There's a lion at the side of the cliff, and the lion is blowing steadily. We learn later that he's blowing scrub. In chapter 2, the lion walks off and Jill lies down in the grass and cries, but then she realizes she's very thirsty and she hears a stream. She goes to the stream, but the lion is sitting right there in front of the stream and she's not sure what to do. So she says to the lion, "Do you eat girls?" He says, "I have eaten lots of things." And then Jill says, "Well, I better not go and drink." And the lion says, "Well, if you don't drink, you'll die of thirst." And so in the end, she eventually goes and drinks anyway. She talks to the lion, and the lion says she has some tasks to do when she gets to Narnia. She goes to the edge of the cliff, and the lion blows her, and she flies through the air over the sea and lands eventually on the ground next to Scrub in Narnia. Chapter 3. They look around, it's very colourful, and there's a boat with a lot of people, and someone's going on the boat, and they're not sure who it is. And an owl alights beside them, Glimfeather. And the owl talks to them and says, "You've just missed the king, so I better go and talk to Trumpkin." Trumpkin's an old dwarf by now, and he has trouble hearing, which they're taken into the castle and given a nice feast, and then they're put to bed in the castle. In chapter 4, Glimfeather turns up at Jill's window, and the owls have also turned up at Eustace's window, and they hop on the owls' backs and are taken to a tower where the owls are having a meeting. And it is here that we learn about Prince Rilian, who was Caspian's son. Prince Rilian has gone missing, and the story goes that they were all out for a picnic, Prince Rilian, his mum, and a whole bunch of others. His mum was a bit tired, so she was lying down. A green serpent came and bit her. She eventually died, and they couldn't find the serpent anywhere, but it was Rilian's task to kill that green serpent. The green serpent couldn't be found, but there was a lady in a green dress who was in the same place where the green serpent was seen, and she was so beautiful she entranced Prince Rilian. He went up a few times, and then he disappeared completely, and has never been seen since. Grub and Pole are told they must go north. Chapter 5. They fly away on the owls' backs, and they land near the wigwam of a marsh wiggle called Puddleglum. He's a very negative fellow, and even when he smokes, the smoke goes downward out of his pipe instead of upward. So they head off to bed, and they wake up and have a meal of eels, and realise that Puddleglum is going with them on their trip. They have to go past the giants, which Scrub is a little bit worried about. Anyway, chapter 6. Here they head off, go past what looks like some giant rocks, but they're actually giants themselves, and they're playing a game where they throw rocks at a target in the middle. They manage to make it past the rocks, and they go
a long way and they're eating lots of chickens and things. And then they see a bridge, a giant bridge. They reach the top of the bridge and they keep going. It's quite big. Puddleglum thinks it's going to fall to pieces, as Puddleglum does. Then they meet these two people. There's the lady of the green kirtle. She's beautiful. And this knight that just sits on his horse but doesn't say anything. She says you need to go to Harfang and they will look after you. Say that you have been sent for the autumn feast. They want to go to Harfang and they almost forget about the signs now. Chapter 7. They climb up these strange trench-like things and it's very cold and wintry. They're not sure where they are, but it looks very weird. Jill falls into some trench and it sort of goes nowhere. She's not sure what she's fallen into. Then they look ahead and they see this beautiful building with lighted windows and it looks very cozy and inviting. They decide they're going to go there. They go inside and the porter gives Puddleglum some liquor and he starts drinking it. Chapter 8, they go in and the Queen looks at them and Jill repeats that she's there for the autumn feast and they're all very happy about it, but a little bit sad as well, which is a bit strange. Jill goes into her room, it's about the size of a church, and has some annoying nurse that's like this. Now, no raining now, ducky. She goes to sleep, but she has a dream when she's asleep. And in her dream, the gigantic ruins have the word "under me" on them, and there's a sort of a lion that is in the dream. When she wakes up, the others come into her room, Puddleglum and Eustace. They look out the window, and on the ruins of the giant city, they see the words "under me." They suddenly realize they've muffed one of the signs. So they decide that they're going to be nice to all the giants from then on. That day, they're really nice, and Jill goes up to the giant queen and very sweetly says that she's looking forward to the autumn feast, still not knowing that they are actually on the menu for the autumn feast. They start to look for a way out of Harfang. So they decide to wait till all the giants are asleep and go out through the cook's room. They go into the kitchen and they have to wait for the cook to go to sleep. While they're doing that, they look at some menus and find out that they are actually on the menu, as well as the marshwiggle. They sneak out and are seen by a hunting party. They rush to the place where the "under me" is written and dive into the hole. Jill's almost caught, but she quickly scrambles inside. Once inside, they block it up. It's complete pitch black. They stumble forward and then slip on some scree and go for about 1 kilometre. When they all come to, they realise they've lost all source of light. They hear a strange voice talking to them. In the next chapter, we see a whole bunch of Earthmen as the light turn on. They're all looking very weird. The Earthmen say they must come with them. So they follow them, and they go past a whole bunch of weird chambers, including a chamber of sleeping reptiles, and a chamber with a giant man in it, who is asleep and will wake up at the end of time. They come to a boat at a giant underground lake. They hop in, and it's time to go across. They go across and see that they've come to a city that's underground. They come out of the city and see a man in a castle. The man is very obnoxious. Jill does not like him. In the next chapter, the man says that every night for 1 hour he goes stark raving mad and has to be tied to a silver chair. He asks them to promise that they will not untie him. They all promise, and then he's tied up in the chair. While he's tied up in the chair, he changes and becomes sane. He says to them, "I'm Prince Rillian, you must untie me." They don't believe him until he says, "In the name of Aslan, you must untie me," which means that he is Prince Rillian, because that's what Aslan said at the start of the book. So they untie him and he attacks the chair and hacks it to bits. After he's done hacking it up, there is a knock at the door. In comes the Queen. She is dressed in a beautiful green dress. She comes in and she throws some powder on the fire and starts playing a mandolin. When she's playing the mandolin, she's talking. She talks about how the real world doesn't exist, how the sun doesn't exist, Aslan doesn't exist, only her world exists. She's trying to enchant them. Puddleglum decides he's going to save the day, so he puts his foot in the fire, stamps out the evil incense, and they all realize who she really is. The queen turns into a serpent. She wraps herself around Rillian, and Rillian and the others start attacking the serpent. They eventually manage to chop off her head, and the queen, or the witch as she really is dead. Outside, all sorts of things are happening because the queen is dead. The lake is rising, and the earthmen are running around like mad, freed from their enchantment. Rillian, Puddleglum and the others look outside and think that there's a war happening, and they have to face it. So they get on their horses, and they proudly go out to face whatever is attacking them. They hop on their horses and realise that the earthmen are actually quite scared. Puddleglum catches one, called Golg, to see what's happening. They tell Golg the queen is dead, and that they killed her. And Golg says, well, you're our friend then. They ask Golg whether there's a way out. He says that they were digging to take over a realm and they were very near the surface, so they just need to go past the town and up the hill. Golg then shows them the chasm where he and the rest of the Earthmen are going to go into. They're all celebrating with fireworks because now they get to go home. They're no longer under the Queen's enchantment. Golg asks Rillian whether he wants to come down to the land of Bism, which is down in the chasm. He says he'd love to, but he has to run his country. So Puddleglum, Jill, Eustace and Rillian hop on their horses and go up the long trek to avoid the water that's rising. They travel for hours and hours, and the light is slowly going more and more dim. Then all of a sudden the light goes out, and they reach an earth wall in front of them. There's a strange, queer light in the sky. They don't know what it is. In the second to last chapter, Jill goes up to the top of the hole and is pulled out with screams of help and muffled sort of struggle. It's revealed later that she got a snowball in her mouth, and fauns and dryads and dwarves were playing some sort of dance in the firelight. They get the others out, and then they get moles and other things to dig the hillside away, and out comes Rillian with the horses and Puddleglum. They go into a cave, have a bit of food, and go to sleep. In the final chapter, Eustace and Jill hop on 2 centaurs and ride all the way to Cair Paravel, where the ship has just come in with the old King Caspian in it. King Caspian sees his son Rillian, they embrace, they say something, and then King Caspian dies, which turns into a sad scene. Jill and Eustace are swept away into the woods with all the trees around them. They go up to the creek and they see old King Caspian in the water. Aslan asks Eustace to prick his paw, and a great drop of blood goes into the stream, and then old Eustace is transformed into young Eustace and comes back to life. Then old King Caspian is transformed into young King Caspian and comes back to life. And so with a roar he smashes down the wall, and they all charge towards the bullies and hit them with the flat of their swords. The bullies run off crying. The principal thinks that a giant lion has escaped from the circus. Aslan restores the wall and disappears. Experiment House is shut down, and in Narnia there's a cave that is built where they came out, and that's where people can visit. And if you go to Narnia, you can visit that today.